Hello and welcome back to Wirex Crypto Podcast, where we unpack the most exciting stories in blockchain, fintech, and Web3 innovation. I'm your host, Lianna Adams, and today we're taking you on a journey to Africa and emerging markets, a region where the promise of digital finance is not just a vision, but a movement. Our guest today is a true pioneer in this space, Mouloukou Sanoh, CEO and co-founder of MANSA Finance. He's on a mission to reimagine financial systems, making them more accessible and equitable for millions who've been left out. In today's episode, we'll explore how blockchain is powering this revolution, the unique challenges of scaling financial solutions in emerging markets, and the incredible opportunities that lie ahead. So grab your headphones, it's time to dive in. Hi, Mouloukou.
Thank you so much for having me. I have eagerly been awaiting this conversation.
Yeah, so maybe let's start with your professional background and also maybe your journey into how you got into MANSA Finance.
Yes, definitely. Hello, everybody. My name is Mouloukou. I previously used to work in investment banking and private equity in Hong Kong. My first foray into crypto was actually in 2019 when I worked as a token listing intern at one of the largest crypto exchanges at the time called Trade.io. We did a really big ICO. We raised $40 million. Then I worked for a small boutique investment bank in Hong Kong. We actually did a lot of crypto deals. We helped Animoca raise funding. We worked on the Telegram deal and a few others. I then afterwards went into private equity, high growth private equity. Was investing in consumer companies all over the world. I looked at shoes, clothes, whatever, like anything that had a consumer facing side to it, we will take a look at. Afterwards, I did two things. Number one, I ran the largest Web3 focused VC fund on the African continent called Adaverse. It was a $100 million fund. We did 50 investments. We invested across the whole stack of crypto, from exchanges to wallets to B2B companies to 2C companies in Africa, in Asia, and in Europe as well. At the same time, I was a co-founder of a company called Cassava Network. It's essentially like a quest to earn platform. We scaled it to over 500,000 wallets. By the time I left, it became one of the largest crypto platforms on the African continent. I then afterwards started MANSA essentially a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago from now. And essentially the goal for MANSA is to provide instant liquidity solutions for global payment companies. So essentially revolutionizing the way that global payments have been done. Instead of your typical T+1 to T+3 time frame that you have to wait for your global payments, we work with some of the largest payment companies in the world and provide them that liquidity so they can essentially disperse funds quicker and settle their transactions instantly. We're backed by Tether, the creator of USDT. And we are on track to do $30 million in total payments volume this month, which is our fourth month.
Wow, that's really impressive. And your journey is just, I am so inspired, right? Because you've done so much. What was the financial situation like in emerging markets like Africa before digital finance came along?
I think before digital, when it comes to essentially fintech and mobile technology, I believe that the African continent and especially emerging markets have actually been way above the curve than us here in the West. For example, there's this company called M-Pesa, which is essentially the Revolut or the WeChat Pay or the Alipay of essentially Kenya, and it handles 90+% of Kenya's GDP. So Kenya is completely a cashless society, right? And that's been happening for almost the past 20 years. Same thing in many places in other African countries, where essentially there's this concept called mobile money, where people have essentially been sending each other funds, but through mobile phones. So essentially, if I were to add $10 to my mobile credits, that would actually be considered real cash. And then I would be able to pay goods with that. send money back and forth within the country, right? So like I would say like in terms of financial technology, the African continent has been the African continent and other emerging markets have been above the curve, mainly because of the many challenges that you have on the ground. Like for example, right, like on the African continent, I believe there's and please forgive me like if the numbers I quote like are wrong, but there's something like a ridiculous amount of like one ATM per like 1,000 people, right? So and then there are multiple rural areas. So like the main question is, how do you get financial services, or how do you get the ability to send money in and out to these people in all these different parts of the country? Like you can't build the infrastructure again, like it's going to take way too long. So like due to these like constraints and challenges that like that are persistent on the ground, there's really been a lot of innovation like in terms of mobile money and essentially mobile technology.
I love how, innovation was born out of necessity, in addressing a challenge, right? That's being experienced. Do people in emerging markets trust blockchain, or is there still skepticism?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like when you're speaking like in the context of emerging markets, I think it's very important to essentially segment blockchain, crypto, and stablecoins. So essentially on the blockchain side of things, right? Yeah, people, I think just like people like around the world, people are still waiting for essentially, okay, like what are the real live use cases, right? That don't involve pictures of monkeys or like so on and so forth, right? That can actually, help solve like some of the challenges, or like help solve like some of the like governmental issues that we have, right? So I think like people are essentially quite bullish on like a blockchain, right? And then there is crypto, right? Like so like all these alt tokens, Bitcoin, so on and so forth. The African continent has among the highest adoption of cryptocurrency as a percentage of their total like population, and I believe it's the same with Latin, and it's the same with the and with Southeast Asia. And on the other hand, you have stablecoins. And I think stablecoins are, in my opinion, the greatest invention in the history of money. Because when you look at the context again, right? Like I know I keep talking about context, but context is incredibly important when you speak about, emerging markets. You have a large youth population. You have insane amount of currency devaluation. Like I think the Argentinian peso and the Nigerian naira, two of the largest economies in Latin America and Africa, respectively, have lost in the past 5 years, have lost over 300% of the value of the currency against the dollar. So if you are holding any of these local currencies, you are literally losing money day by day. And so like essentially people are always looking for the ability to hedge their currency loss. Furthermore, like many of these economies again have essentially a lack of local fiat US dollars. So like it makes paying goods abroad extremely difficult for them. So what stablecoins has done, and the main reason why stablecoins have become so popular, right? I think in Africa, Latin and Southeast Asia, over 80% of all crypto transactions are in stablecoins. So people are using these stablecoins not like in the West, for example, like to like go on and trade, but they're actually using it, number one, as a hedge against inflation. Number two, the ability to send money in and out seamlessly, and to essentially be able to as well do trade with the global world.
Yeah, so I just feel like it does make it very accessible, right? How is blockchain technology helping people in these areas to get better access to financial services? Is it, I mean, obviously stable coins, as you've mentioned, is one way, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think, like stablecoins are like, I believe that the technology within blockchain that has had the highest impact is stablecoins, as I've mentioned, because like stablecoins like dramatically like reduce like the cost of sending money, and the ability to, and the ease as well, like to send money. Like for example, for my business account in Hong Kong, I am unable to send money to Nigeria, because Nigeria is on a lot of banks' gray list, right? And they're on the gray list because the bank doesn't have the necessary compliance or necessary like AML tools present locally to verify each payment. Or to put it better way is they just simply don't care, right? And even in Dubai, right, like it took me ages to find a bank that would send money to Kenya, for example, right? So like if you think about it, and that's the same thing with Argentina, Latin America, or like for some countries in Southeast Asia, right? So like I don't think it's controversial to say that the current financial system works against emerging market countries and emerging markets people. And so they are like the ones essentially that lose out the most and are essentially hurt the most by the way that things are currently structured. And stablecoin completely upends everything, right? I no longer need to go to the bank, right? So if I wanted to send you money, and it doesn't matter where you are across the world, all I need is a mobile phone, a stable internet connection, and I can send you funds essentially ASAP in a matter of seconds. So you can off-ramp these funds and essentially pay locally and vice versa. So I think like that has had the highest impact, right? And then also like you've had many companies building on top of stablecoins, right? Like you've had companies building remittance solutions on top of stablecoins, for example, right? It currently costs 10% on average to send money to the African continent, 8% to Latin, 6% to like Southeast Asia. A lot of companies are building stablecoin remittance railways and stablecoin remittance companies where they're drastically reducing the cost of sending from these double digits or like high single digits to anywhere from like 1 to 2 to essentially 3%, right? And then you also have people like that are providing virtual Visa and MasterCards through like stablecoins as well, right? So like there are a lot of like innovations like that are built and powered on top of stablecoins.
Yeah, and I also love that it's empowering people from emerging markets. It really does allow accessibility. When previously it's a bit of a struggle, right? I mean, I still remember days of like, probably sending money through Western Union, and it takes ages, as well as, it's pretty expensive. So why do you think traditional banks haven't been able to reach everyone in these regions?
I would always think that, okay, like I'm getting X amount. And whenever I would go to Western Union, I would get 10 to 20% less than like what I wanted, So the fees are like essentially like ridiculous, and like stablecoins completely changes this.
Yeah, absolutely. And just wanted to kind of like expand a bit further on, why you think traditional banks haven't been able to reach everyone in these regions.
I think it's more of a structural issue rather than a lack of a bank issue, because structurally, because like you have to think about like what I said earlier is that there's an incredibly low amount of essentially there's an incredibly low amount of banks, like physical ATM banks in many of these like emerging markets, because the infrastructure simply isn't there, right? So think about it. If I want to open a bank account in an emerging market, and like mind you, right, many of these banks still aren't like online, right? I first have to go to the bank. I need to give all my KYC docs, so on and so forth. I need to wait a week, and then like we are going like back and forth. And in many of these like emerging markets, let's say like I'm in a village in a random place in like Uganda, there's no bank in my village. So how am I going to like open a bank? Like the bank is going to be in the nearest city, which is 50 kilometers away, right? So like it's not that the banks haven't been willing to like do so, right? Like in many countries, right, bank account opening has like ticked up quite like significantly. It's just it is very inaccessible for like many of the ordinary people, and that's one of the main reasons why mobile money has gone up. And that's also essentially one reason why I'm so bullish about fintech stablecoins in Africa, because people already used to using their phone as a wallet. Because currently right now with their phone, they're sending money back and forth, so on and so forth. So with stablecoins and crypto, it's essentially the same concept, where the phone in your pocket is your bank and you have your wallet. And from there, you can transact in and out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I think with the logistical like challenges, right? And especially when you said like one ATM machine to 1,000 people, that's a huge challenge, and it doesn't really help empower people, right? So, is blockchain really about helping people in need, or is it more about getting more people into crypto, do you think?
Okay, I think like when I mean, okay, that really depends on like who you talk to, right? Because different people have had different views and like have different quote unquote ethos into what crypto and like blockchain like should be. But in my opinion and like my view of this is that blockchain and crypto like in general is supposed to enhance transparency, supposed to decentralize the world, make systems better, fairer, and cheaper, right? And the best use case for that is in emerging markets, in Europe or in Dubai, where I'm currently in. I do not need stablecoins because if I'm using my local bank account, I can send money to a friend and he receives it in less than 5 seconds. Same thing in Europe. When I'm in America, I use like Revolut. When I'm in China, like I use WeChat Pay or like Alipay. So what is really the impact or the ROI if you look at it like objectively, it's not really that high. But in emerging market where it actually solves solutions, that's where you can bring in the next billion people on chain essentially that are actually going to be power users of it and that are actually going to use it on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I love that. And I also feel like, the more they use, the more use cases they'll find as well, right? And to start innovating with blockchain, what can the rest of the world learn from how blockchain is being used in these regions?
Yeah. So essentially, like I believe that the key things that the rest of the world can learn is that for blockchain to really thrive, we need to build solutions that actually positively impact the essentially like rest of the world, right? And that have solutions locally, because if you really want adoption, like you need people like to like use it, right? And meme coin trading is great, right? But like what does meme coin trading actually help like improve, or like what does meme coin trading actually bring, right? Yes, it brings new eyeballs like to the space, but less than 1% of actual meme coin traders actually make money, right? So right, like I think like what like the main lessons is that like they can learn is build something that people want, and build something that will bring people on chain, and build something that will make existing infrastructure cheaper, fair, more transparent, and better.
Yeah, and I also feel like, it's definitely the accessibility, in leveling the playing field as well for people in these regions. So what's the one thing people always get wrong about blockchain in Africa that you'd love to set straight?
So eventually, like the one thing that people like get wrong and they completely like ignore is that like I think the African continent is the third largest number of essentially crypto users. So like people like don't realize the massive scale, or people don't realize the on the ground impact that crypto has, and the ability to aggregate a large amount of users, right? So you always hear people say, oh, we want to bring 1 billion people on chain, we want to bring hundreds of millions of people on chain. You're not going to do that in America. You're not going to do that essentially in Europe. The only place like where you can do that is essentially emerging markets, right? So I think any serious blockchain organization like that has a long-term view of the like ecosystem, and has essentially like a long-term view of like really bringing key people on chain, should have an emerging market strategy.
Yeah, I love that. And in some ways, as you were you when you were talking, I just had this like my country is better than yours.
Literally.
Do you think big crypto companies are doing enough to support adoption in emerging markets?
Yeah, I think, okay. So the thing is, right? Like I like, that's an interesting question, because like then you need to ask yourself, right? Do we need big companies in order to thrive? Like, are big companies needed for the ecosystem to thrive, or do we need a bunch of like smaller companies to grow into these bigger companies, right? I am personally, right, like of the opinion that instead of the need for bigger companies, we need to have a proper ecosystem and a proper environment that spurs innovation, right? Like we need easier access, like to capital, right? Like we need media like yours to like interview people from like emerging market and like essentially tell their stories for the world, for the whole world to see and like to hear as well. And I think that is what would make like a real impact.
Yeah, I love what you said because, I feel sometimes as well that big crypto companies may not necessarily know the actual needs of the locals, right? Like what's happening locally, whereas like if you have, smaller companies that are more, hands-on and they really get down to like the people on the ground to really figure out what their needs are, right? And I think that is more efficient. So how do you see young developers in Africa shaping the future of blockchain technology?
Yeah, I'm actually incredibly bullish on like devs in Africa and like in emerging markets in like particular, right? Because if you really want to build something meaningful for a market, you need to essentially you need to like essentially understand the market. Like you need to understand the challenges of the market. Like you need to have a deeper understanding of essentially the like nuances and there's no one better than the developers who live and breathe and face those challenges every single day. So like yeah, like I am incredibly bullish on like young developers in emerging markets.
Yeah, sometimes being on Twitter spaces, X spaces, I do come across quite a lot of young developers from Africa and, they always really hungry to learn and to explore, different use cases. Yeah, so I'm really bullish as well. Mouloukou, like, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not really. Like I would like to thank you for such a wonderful, engaging conversation. So like thank you so much for your time. And then like I actually like have a few questions for you, right? Like from like all the podcast like episodes like that you've done like with all these like amazing people like all over the world, right? What are some of the things that you are most bullish on?
Oh wow. I mean, I've been learning so much through this podcast. Tokenization is definitely something that I'm really bullish on as well. But you know, for me, wherever the most impact can be done is where I'm most bullish, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So you understand exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Which is why I'm really bullish whenever we can level the playing field, right? For people to access like, these technologies and also, to access education as well, right? Because I feel, many times and very often, the people from emerging markets are usually sidelined, and I think blockchain technology is definitely leveling the playing field. And
Yeah,
amazing.
definitely.
Great. And thank you so much again. And that's a wrap on another enlightening episode of our podcast. A massive thank you to Mouloukou for shedding light on how digital finance is breaking barriers and creating new possibilities for communities worldwide.